What happens when, for the first time, you allow yourself to look at death without fear, not as a tragedy, not as an end, but as a liberation? Because if you stop to think about it, perhaps death is not the enemy, as we've always been taught. Perhaps it is the friend who calls us back to life, reminding us of who we truly are. Our fear of death is, in reality, a reflection of the fear of not living. We live as if we have infinite time, as if life is something that can be postponed, controlled, stretched, and it is in this illusion of control that we imprison ourselves. But death, with its silent presence, confronts us with the truth. Everything we love, everything we fear, everything we are, all of it is transient. And when we finally look at it, not with terror, but with acceptance, the weight of our anxieties begins to dissipate. Alan Watts, with his unique wisdom, invites us to see death not as an obstacle, but as the very key to inner freedom. He reminds us that the awareness of our finitude does not imprison us. It frees us, because when we know that there is no time to waste, something in us awakens. We are forced to live with more intensity, with more presence. The game of life becomes more real, more urgent, more profound. The fear of death transforms into an ally, and what once seemed like a threat now reveals itself as the great liberator. True freedom arises when we stop fighting against what is inevitable. When we allow ourselves to feel the fragility of our existence, we begin to realize that deep down, we control nothing. We don't control time, nor events, nor our very being. And then, instead of resisting, we accept. Death, which seemed like an implacable enemy, becomes the companion that shows us the way back to the now. But there is something even deeper to be understood. What we truly fear, at the core, is not death, but what it represents, the end of the illusion of control. We live in a constant search for stability, for security, for something fixed amid the chaos. And no matter how hard we try, we know that life can never truly be controlled. Everything is impermanent, fluid, mutable, even ourselves. When we accept this, when we look at death not with resistance but with the calmness of one who understands its inevitability, we begin to live, not with fear of the end, but with the beauty of knowing that, like the waves of the ocean, all things come and go. And so, death is no longer something to be feared. It is the gateway to true freedom. Because when we accept that we are transient, we begin to live more fully, more truly. There is no more need to run, to flee, to control. There is only the presence of the moment, the acceptance of what is. Like the breeze that cannot be trapped but fills the space around it, death reminds us of what is real and sets us free. Procrastination is one of the subtlest forms of avoidance of the true fear, the fear of our own finitude. What we delay, at its essence, is not just a task, a meeting, or an obligation, but life itself. By avoiding decisions, by pushing tomorrow what we could do today, we are in fact avoiding the present. We flee from what is immediate, from what requires us to be alive now. The fear of confronting our own death lies behind our resistance. If we accept that life is finite, then in some way, everything we do delays the realization of our own transience. The right moment never comes. There is always a new tomorrow stretching out before us, a false promise that someday we will be able to live. But in the meantime, the present slips through our fingers, and this is how procrastination becomes a prison, where we are trapped in an illusion that tomorrow will be the time to live. But death, this subtle presence that accompanies us, challenges us to understand that the only moment we truly have is now. There is no right moment to live, because life is the now. Alan Watts's play on music and time reveals this. The moment to live is not some far-off future. It is here, now, in this very second. Death is not a reason to hesitate. On the contrary, it is the reason to act. Every passing second brings us closer to an inevitable end, and it is precisely this finitude that frees us. We mistakenly imagine that procrastination will protect us from our fragility, but what it does is prevent us from living fully. Procrastination is the escape from now, and death is the true awareness that now is all we have. When we stop fearing the end, we see the value of every action, every word, every breath. After all, true life can only be lived when we stop postponing it. Disconnection from the present is perhaps one of the greatest causes of modern anxiety. We live in the future or in the past, but never in the now. We look ahead, always searching for the next goal, the next success, the next achievement, or we dive into memories, into losses, into failures that can no longer be changed. But in both cases, we are absent. We are where we are not. And so, we distance ourselves from the only place where life truly happens, the now. Anxiety arises from our attempt to control what we cannot control. We live in expectation of something that never arrives, or in shame of something that has already passed. And while we do this, the moment that really matters slips away, without us even noticing. Philosopher Watts points out that true freedom lies precisely in abandoning this ceaseless escape. When we accept the transience of everything, we begin to live with more clarity. When we see life not as something to be conquered or controlled, but as something to be fully experienced, with all its highs and lows, we find peace. The acceptance of our finitude dissolves anxiety, because when we know we are dying every moment, the urgency of the present reveals itself as a gift. Every second becomes a precious thing, something that cannot be repeated or redone. And with this awareness, the fear of the future disappears. We no longer need to run. The now is all we have, and it is in it that true freedom resides. The search for control is, in a sense, a desperate attempt to deny death. We try to control life, pain, the future, but in doing so, we distance ourselves from the freedom it offers. Life is like a river. The more we try to hold the water, the more it slips through our fingers. The more we try to control, the more we lose. The paradox is that by trying to hold the flow of life, we end up distancing ourselves from it. In his river metaphor, Watts reminds us that true freedom comes from surrender, not resistance. When we stop fighting against what is, when we stop trying to hold on to what we cannot hold, we find ourselves free. Control is an illusion. Freedom lies in allowing life to follow its course, accepting uncertainty, the unforeseen, and above all, death. The more we try to avoid death, the more it controls us. When we accept it, it liberates us. Life, with all its unpredictability, offers the only kind of control that really matters: control over our perception. We can control how we react to the flow of life. We can choose to live with more lightness, with more presence. We no longer need to cling to what scares us. When we accept that we cannot control everything, we find a freedom we never imagined was possible. And in that space, life becomes richer, deeper, and paradoxically, more ours. Death, in its essence, is a void. It is the absence that gives form to life. And yet, the void is not something to be feared. On the contrary, it is the fertile ground of creation. When we accept that we are dying every moment, we open space for the new. The void, which at first glance seems frightening, is in reality the necessary condition for renewal. The void is the blank canvas on which life can paint itself. Without the void of death, there is no renewal. Zen Buddhism teaches us that true spirituality arises when we accept the void, when we surrender to the unknown. The void is not the end, but the beginning. It is the space where true creativity emerges. When death becomes a friend, a reminder of our transience, creativity flourishes. Spirituality, then, is not something we seek, but something that arises spontaneously when we stop fighting against what is. The void becomes the ground where true consciousness blossoms. When we accept that death is inevitable, our relationship with life is completely transformed. We stop searching for security and control, instability, and begin to live with more lightness, more authenticity. Life gains a new dimension when we understand that, contrary to what we thought, death is not the end, but part of the eternal dance that allows us to live.